Hey everybody, Bryce Ayers from CodeLife.io, and today we're going to be building a simple demo with React, making these really cool sliders. So we got blue, green, and red, and as the further you go right, the greater the opacity. So it'd be like a 1 there, all the way down to, I did 0.1 here for the opacity. And you'll see the numbers change, and I think what we'll eventually do, maybe in another video, is take this project and kind of reuse it. And as you get up closer to here, this would change your blue value, and then maybe we can change the color text or something like that. Maybe you can copy it and then paste the color into your CSS or something like that. I think that'd be pretty interesting. So let's go ahead and jump into our project. All right, and so for this project, we're going to use Create React App to spin up our project. You've probably seen me use this in other videos. I'm going to use Yarn for this one. If you're not familiar with Yarn, it's just like NPM. I believe it was created by Facebook, and so it's a little bit faster way to create stuff, I believe. So you can check out the yarnpackage.com and follow the instructions there. It should just be npm install -g for global and then Yarn. And we're also going to use styled components for our project. So make sure you install version 4.2.0. Very important. So if you just run this command, it's going to install whatever the latest version is. Instead, you want to say npm install styled components at 4.2.0. So that way we're all on the same page. Let me go ahead and install this. What version are they on, actually? I'm curious. I think it's 16 out something. Perfect. And obviously to get npm, you need Node installed. So go to nodejs.org if you need to. So let's go over to our project. Paste this here, and let's change the name of the project from my app to, we'll call it React Slider. So that should go ahead and install. Boop, boop, boop. Almost done. Okay, perfect. So we have a couple commands there. Let's cd into our project. So now we change directories. We're in the project. If you type ls, you can see all the packages in there, or all the files. So now we need to add styled components. So we can go yarn add styled components, and we want version 4.2.0. That'll add that in there for us. Beep, 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 beep. Cool. Looking good. Let's open it up in Visual Studio Code. Hide from sidebar. There we go. All right. So let's jump into our app.js here. And let's go ahead and just start hacking away some stuff here. I don't think we need any of that. And what we can do, let's get rid of the logo since we're not using that anymore. Instead, we want to import styled components. So import styled, not form, from styled components. And what I like to do typically is make a styled component. So basically, styled components creates components for you based on other HTML elements. So most common one, probably div, the div tag. So what we can do is we create a const styles. So just like you're declaring a functional component or presentational component in React, and we'll say styled.div, and this is where it's a little strange. It's tag template literals. So use double backticks. Then you just write your styles in there, just like straight up CSS pretty much, except you can inject variables and do some other cool things that you can't normally do with just regular old CSS. So we'll put that there for now, and we'll essentially want to wrap our app in the styles tag so we can target everything. Just do that for now. So let's go ahead and spin up our server. So I'll clear this and I'll say yarn start, or you can say npm start. Looks like, oh, I got the project already running. Never mind. Hold on 1 second. There we go. So that happens because I already had the project running to show you the demo or the example. So this should spin up here. There we go. Perfect. So if you go to localhost :3000, so that's port 3000, you'll see your project. So we have the word test, nothing too exciting just yet, but that's all right. So next step would be, let's create in our source directory, create a new folder called components, and we'll create a new file called slider.js. Awesome. So in here in slider.js, you need to do the usual, import React from React. And let's go ahead and import styled from styled components. And we'll do the const styles .div. And on this one, since we're going to maintain some state of where the slider is, what we want to do is actually just create a like a stateful component essentially. So, oops, here we go. I was clicking on the wrong page. There we go. Export default class. So this is not a named export like we typically do. Say slider, and since this is a class, we're going to extend the react.component class. And let's set a state. So we're going to set the starting value of the slider. So let's say we'll just call it value and we'll set it 50. You can set it to whatever you want. And actually inside here, we need a function called render. And it will return. And here's where we'll put styles. And then in here, we want our input. And since we're doing sliders, they're actually called ranges. So you can put a range. I like to call them sliders, but I guess some people call like the gallery, multi-picture, like masthead sliders. So it's actually called range. So we can set a min. So we're gonna do 0. Oops. 0, like that. You want to put it between curly braces because that's shows it's a JavaScript and not just a string or a normal type. And then max, we're going to set to 255. And why 255? So for colors, if we're in here, we said color is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this part right here, so you have all zeros right now, but if you were to go FF, that would change the color. And this is red, green, blue, red, blue, green. And so FF would set the color to full max for that value. So we did like this, it'd be red, and that'd be 255 and base 16. So that's why that 255 is important. And you probably see that a lot, networking and other things like that. If you see an IP address like 192.168.1.1 or something like that. So all these values could go up to 255. That's for an IPv4 address. So that's that. That's why we're going to do 255. That's why that's important. So let's finish this off. We'll say value. And we need to set a value to the range. So that dictates where the dot falls on that line. And so what we're going to do is we're going to set it to our state. And then we're going to update our state to tell it where to move to. And let's give it a class name of slider. And then on change. So when we drag it, what we need to do is update the state, the value, So it'll update this value here. And that way the slider goes to the correct place. And so we'll say this dot, let's call it handle on change. And so this is going to be a function we're going to pass to it. What else do we need? Then we actually need to display the value. So I'll say, we'll create a div with a class name of value. And then inside here, we'll put some JavaScript, and we want this dot state dot value. So whatever the current value is, we want to render it right there. So we take a look at this. Oh, we have nothing because we haven't included our slider yet. Let's go over here and import our slider. Say import slider from our components folder /slider. Cool. And we should be able to pop that puppy in right here. And there we go. So we have a super basic looking slider. It doesn't do anything. You can see we click on it, but we can't actually drag it because we're not updating the state. So what we need to do is go into here, back into our slider component, and we need to create that function, this handle on change. So let's go down here, we'll create a class method, essentially, or function, whatever you want to call it here. It's going to take an event. And so what happens is when this happens, it calls it and passes an event. And so the event has different properties to it. And so the one we care about is on the event. It's called, there's a property called target. And then there's a property called value on target. And so we want to grab that. So actually we can probably do this in one line here. So we don't need to put curly braces and all that. So what we're going to do is just update the state and say this dot set state. And what we want to update in the state is the value property. And we're just going to set to e.target.value. And you'll see what I'm saying here. So we'll save that, come back over here, and now we can actually drag it. And so what happens every little bit we drag, it's firing an event. It's probably not super efficient, and we could put what's called a debounce on there. So that way it only would update every so often. But that's fine for now. It's not a super heavy app, so I'm not too worried about optimizing this right now. So what we need to do now is just add some styling to it, make it look a little prettier. So if we go back up here and we have our styles, what do we want to do? Add some stuff in here. So let's make it flex. So the number will go to the right. So we'll say display flex. Let's line everything up. So it'll vertically align. Let's give it a color of the text. Maybe a nice dark gray. And we'll give it some space around it. That'll help when we have multiples of these. And now we have this class with value. Let's update that specifically. And so since we're doing display flex, so there's a property, you can say, it's, I think shorthand for flex grow. You can say flex 1. And so when there's extra space, this item value, this div here will take up 1 unit of space. And so it's all relative though. So if we have another flex item, which we will, the actual range or the slider, we can give that a flex value of 5. And so that'll take up 5/6. And this will take up 1/6, if that makes sense. So it's all relative to each other. And let's just bump up the font size so we can make it more readable. Well, let me bump this up. I always do this. There we go. That's probably way more readable for you now. I've been doing that the last couple of videos and people keep telling me to make it bigger and I always forget. Looks normal on my screen, but I'm sure when you're watching the video, it's a little harder to read. Cool. So we got the value. Now we need to do the slider. This is where this gets a little weird. I had to go look this up. The custom styling of the sliders actually, or the range is actually a little tricky. So flex 6 will do So it'll be 6/7 of the total width it'll take up. Let's say width, let's say, actually what we need to do here, say WebKit appearance, none. So that'll be for all WebKit based browsers like Chrome, I think Safari. Say width 100%. Height, let's just set to 15 pixels. So this stuff's pretty straightforward. I'll show you when we get to the weird part here. Not byte, height. Border radius, 5 pixels. Background, make it nearly white. Outline, we'll say none. Now here's the interesting part. And so we can add properties onto this instead of saying like dot slider, dash WebKit, slider thumb. What we can do, instead of redeclaring it, since it's nested, you just put this ampersand. And now this will say basically like copy this into here. And so you can actually nest the properties in. So it's really nice. You can target stuff explicitly. So this is kind of the weird part where you got to say like : WebKit slider thumb. And this is how we'll be able to do some extra styling here. So just bear with me. So say appearance none, appearance none. And then we're going to say for Mozilla browsers, we got to put some stuff in there. But what we're going to do, instead of basically we need the same kind of, the next bit of code we need in both places in the same place. So what we're going to do is, let's do this. I'm just going to copy this, hit Command D, and I can go up one. There we go. And what we're going to do is we're going to inject some JavaScript here. And so I'm going to create some styles, another like tag template literal, and just drop them right into here. So that way we'll save ourselves some lines of code. And I'm just going to call it slider thumb styles, and I'm going to pass props. And so this is the cool thing about styled components. So here, it's essentially a function itself. And so it gets passed properties. And so you can access the properties by rendering a function, and the properties will get passed in and passed along, and everything will work just fine. So what I want to do is actually create this other template literal, tag template literal. So const slider thumb styles, and it's going to take props, and it's just going to return this template literal. Say width 25 pixels, height 25 pixels, background. What we're going to do is say props.color. And so I'll show you, we're going to pass a color property in here. And it's going to be pretty cool, and that way we can reuse this component. Cursor, make it a pointer. Outline, and you can change these properties how you want, make your slider look customized to you. I just thought this looked kind of cool this way. 3, and here's another magic trick, opacity. And so what we can do is we can say props.opacity, and so we can pass the value in to styled components. I'll just show you this right now actually. If I go down there, what we can do is we can pass props to this. So this makes it pretty neat. So we can say this.state.value when it's greater than 10, because if it's less than 10, we don't want the opacity to fade all the way to 0. We want it still just barely be able to see it so we can use it. So as long as it's greater than 10, what we wanted to do is say this dot state dot value divide by 255. Or what we want to do is return 0.1. So hopefully that makes sense. So if the value is less than 10 on our slider, what we're going to do is render 0.1, so 10% opacity. And so that's going to get passed in as a prop to styles, and our prop gets passed along to this duplicate block of code and ends up in here, and then we're access opacity. So we also need color, and so I'll do color as well. Oops. While we're at it. And this one is going to be this.props.color. And so what we're going to do is actually from wherever we use this component, we're actually going to pass in a color prop. So let's finish up top. We're almost done. So close. WebKit transition. Let's say 0.2 seconds. Opacity, let's say, oops, 0.2 seconds. And I think that looks good. So we come back over, boom. But we aren't passing any color, so there's nothing in the middle. So what we need to do is go back over to our app.js. And in here, we actually need to pass a color to this. So we'll say color. Actually, let's just do a string. That should work. And so I found a nice color blue that I thought looked pretty good for this. M4D9. Save that. And there we can see it turned blue. And we see the opacity getting greater because we're passing in that value essentially. And we put an H1 tag here. Say color picker. I'm just going to copy this slider a couple times. And let's edit our next color. Here's another color I found that I thought looked pretty good. 7-0, so nice green and nice red. So you see that FF, so that means red is full on 255. So you can imagine if we had access to those numbers via the slider, we could actually dump them in and start rendering some colors on screen via the props to our styled components. So pretty cool. So I'll save that. Now we have our 3 pickers. I'm just going to add a little bit of styling now to make sure we kind of throw them in a wrapper here. Wrapper div. Oops, I want to copy those. And up here, let's actually target our app class that was created here already for us. I'm going to say display flex, justify content center. So it'll put it in the middle of the screen for us. And then our wrapper class, let's just say margin top 20 vertical height units. So I think it's 20% of the screen. I think it divides it by 100. And then width, we'll say 50%. So it should put it right smack dab, not quite in the middle. I guess we could actually, so say margin top. I wonder if we can just do this. Align. Nope, that didn't do it. Because I need to set a height property to this guy. That's okay. I'm just going to leave it like this. I think it looks pretty good. All right. So yeah, so that is looking perfect. So in probably the next tutorial I do, we'll actually use these numbers and then pump them in and maybe change the font color of this guy. I would love to see if some of you guys can actually do this. You can probably do it on your own. If you've seen from what we've been doing in our slider, shouldn't be too hard to figure out how you could actually maybe pass those properties back. Maybe have a callback function here. It's probably the easiest way to do it. So in the slider, you just pass the callback function, which will call in here, which will then update some state, which then will update a value that gets past the H1, and then from there you can set the color. So that's how I would do it. So maybe in a quick next video, maybe just follow up on that. But if you guys feel up to it, try it yourselves. Please like and subscribe. It helps others find the video. I appreciate all the feedback. If something doesn't work for you, please leave a comment. I'm usually pretty active in helping out and answering questions. So thanks, guys, and have a good one.